We appreciate all of your time being here today because I know every one of you has a busy life. And for those of you who are parents, adoptive or foster, um, we are excited to hear your stories as well. So we very much like to, we have a lot of information that we can give, but we also want it to be interactive so that we're definitely answering what your questions are. So don't be hesitant to put questions out there because we want to make sure that we answer to the best that we can.
So Kathleen and I have been married for 36 years. We have fostered for give or take 30 of those years. We do have 4 biological children. We have 3 girls and a son. Our 3 girls range in age from 26 to 31. They are all married, thank goodness. And we have a son who is 24. And he lives with us right now. He graduated from college in 2022. He spent a year at Disney doing their college program and got an internship. Came home, he got a job with Penske. And so while he's figuring out where he wants to live, he's living at home. And as Kimberly said, we've also had the blessing of a bunch of foster kids come through our home over those 30 years, and it's been a wonderful experience for Kathleen and I, as well as our kids and our families and our neighbors and our church and our community.
So speaking of biological children in the home, I think I'd like to touch upon how that affects how foster children in your home affect the children that you already have in your home, because statistically 50% of foster parents quit after the first year of service or their first placement, and mostly they tell their agencies that they did not like the way their own children were responding. They felt their behaviors were slipping, and that was very difficult, and that's really the reason that so many people quit. And so we spend a lot of time trying to teach people how to still make your own biological family strong, and just add foster children into it. And I think that's kind of the key, is not to lose your own identity of your family, who you are and what's important to you. And even though you want to listen to the children and accept their cultural differences and, their beliefs that may be different than yours, we also don't want that to disrupt our family. And I think that's really a big, important thing. So we want the children to be incorporated into our family, not incorporate our family into their lives where everything, all the chaos that they come with runs our life. We're very, very careful to protect our family against that.
Yeah, as we moved our way through our journey, one of the things that we started to do that worked was we would tend to foster kids opposite ages of our kids. So when our kids were younger, we got teenagers because we could talk to them and say, hey, give us until 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and we'll take care of our kids and we'll get them to bed, and then we'll have all the time for you that you need. And they would understand that because they were older. And then the conversation reversed itself as our kids got older. We tended to take younger kids because we could tell our kids, hey, let us get our fosters to bed, and then we'll catch up with you and help with homework or have this conversation or that conversation. Sometimes, even though you would think it would be good for them to be of the same ages, sometimes we found that they would tend to compete for attention, and going the opposite ages seem to work with a lot of the kids. Although it's funny, our 2 oldest daughters are 31 and 30. And when they were, 4 and 2, we had a set of brothers that were
1 and 2, and they were 4 and 6.
Okay, there you go. Melissa and Catherine were 1 and 2, and
Mm-hmm.
Raymond and David were 4 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Raymond and David probably for 3 or 4 years. We had them for a long time. And they kind of grew up as a sibling group of 4. And to this day, they call each other brother and sister. Mm-hmm. And that's been fun to see. We attended both of Raymond and David's weddings. Our kids went to their weddings. They now have children, baptisms. So it's been fun to watch that too.
And I would say, there are some agencies out there that if you call them and talk to them, they'll say, well, we really don't need anybody unless you're interested in age 14 or 16 or 18. So, they're just, sometimes I find some of the agencies are not very welcoming. And I want to assure you that if you get into this and you say, I really don't want to take a 1 or a 2-year-old, that's okay. You do what's comfortable for you. And then I guarantee you will kind of expand out a little bit, because maybe your first placement is a 1 or a 2-year-old, and then maybe the next placement is a 2-year-old with a 4-year-old brother or sister. And then you kind of expand a little bit. And then, you're in it a few years and you're comfortable with that. And so now you're going to take a sibling group with a 2, 4, and 6-year-old. So I just tell people, like, don't get scared about that, because I think that foster parents and foster children both have kind of a bad reputation. You watch the media and the books and the TV shows, and the houses are run down, and foster parents are mean and all of that. And, also when we're foster parents, we're kind of intimidated to take children in. And I just want to say, we have had so few problems. And I don't know, after the first 10 or 20 or 30, I thought, well, maybe we just get easy kids. But I don't think that's it after you've been in it a whole lifetime. I think it's that children really want to just be treated respectfully, like any of us. And so, when something's going really crazy, we're like, whoa, like, time out. I'm totally not understanding what's going on here. Can you help me understand? Now, if they're 2, maybe they can't help me understand. But if they're 8, they probably can help me understand. And I'll say, I want to make things better for you. I want to understand why you're so upset. And it just de-escalates things. And I just think that foster care kind of seems so out there and kind of scary, but it really isn't. So anybody who's kind of on the fence about it, I would encourage you to, give it a try, because we've made such wonderful relationships with the families of the children. Now, some of here's what happens to the children. The case plan reunifies and they go home to their parents, or maybe they go to a kinship placement, maybe an aunt or a grandma or something, or maybe they're adopted because the case plan did not make it all the way through. They could not make their goals. And so the courts had to step in and take permanent custody. And so we've had children in all 3, right? We've had children who have left our house to go to an adoptive home and to go home. And we try to be very, very close with the biological families, and we try to help them. We foster parents bridge, right? We try to support their family and try to get their children home to them. But sometimes that's just not possible. And so in that regard, sometimes we're out there looking for people like, there was a family at the bank that Ron works with, and these people had adopted 3 children, and in passing, the foster dad had said to Ron, gosh, we're kind of thinking we'd like to adopt 2 more, and, maybe a little girl, a little boy, and Ron said, well, gosh, we have 3 in our house, and we think they're going to probably go up for adoption. We don't know, but we just think that's what's going to happen. And lo and behold, 6 months later, that's exactly what happened. Permanent custody was obtained. They came to our house in the meantime and started a relationship with the children. And we always want the children to feel really happy about where they're going and not scared. So we just introduce people as, these are our friends, not these are potential people who may want to adopt you. And we just spend time with them so the children are super comfortable. And then lo and behold, that biological mother of those children had another baby, and they were like, oh, well, we were only going to do 2, but then it was 3, and now it's 4, but we think we can do it. And then surprise, another 10 months later, she's expecting again and having twins. So they ended up with 6 children under the age of 6, and they already had 3 from another adoption. So they had 9 children under the age of 14. And these people are just amazing. Life is tough. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's simple, but these children are really thriving in that family, and we get to see them from time to time. So I think if you're wanting to maybe potentially adopt a child, just understand that, you're always going to be working towards achieving a case plan for the family. And sometimes those children will go home. Sometimes you'll get to stay in touch with them. Sometimes you won't. And sometimes they'll go up for adoption, which could then be your chance to adopt children if you're interested.
Yeah, can I say something? So that's really interesting. Like, to me, if you're really wanting to adopt, it would be really lovely, I think, to find a family like yours to be friends with. I mean, that's like the importance of this community, because I know when we were first wanting to adopt and overwhelmed at the whole, process and which direction should we go, and then we felt really called to just open our minds to consider fostering and like trying that path, with the goal of adoption. That was our original goal. I did meet other families who were more in, just like, well, we're just planning on fostering. And I remember telling somebody like, well, if that child ends up, being adopted, like, let me know, because we would really be interested in adopting them. So that is an interesting, way, because there are families who foster, and that's just their vocation. Maybe can you explain a little bit about why you chose to foster, and that you are choosing not to adopt, and how that is for the children? I mean, I love the idea that you're saying that you kind of find families who will adopt the children a lot of times. Like, you'll be looking out for, and maybe you could tell like a couple stories about, how you've done that.
Oh, we had a recent story, Kimberly. Last year, we had a sibling group, a brother and a sister, and the 4-year-old girl was in preschool. And long story short, Kathleen built a relationship with the preschool teacher. And through that process, the preschool teacher and her husband went through foster parent training. They are now foster parents. They're a foster to adopt home. This case did not go well. Kathleen was close to it, knew it wasn't going well. So we moved those 2 kids to their house so they could begin to bond with that family, because that bonding is important. And they're going to adopt those kids. And so, it just came from a conversation with a preschool teacher along the way. So that was really nice. With regard to the adoption, I think for me, we felt blessed to have 4 kids of our own, and we knew so many families out there that were looking to have kids or start a family or this or that. And 2 things. One, for me, it felt a little selfish to do that, because they're like, this preschool teacher and her husband had no kids.
You've been married 10 years.
Yeah, and then this was like divine intervention and meant to be. And had we adopted them, that probably would have never happened. And so that's a big reason. And the other thing too is, for us, had we started adopting foster kids, it would have limited our ability to foster and be that bridge to either get them back home or get them somewhere else.
And we've had families beg us to adopt their children, but we want to be foster parents and we want to do it long term. And a lot of families that adopt have to close out their home, because that's how many children they can realistically take care of. So there are foster only homes. There are foster to adopt homes. There really are not only adoption homes anymore. There's private adoptions, of course, but you have to go through a agency to get your foster care license pretty much anymore. And just let them know from the beginning, we're interested in fostering to adopt. So if you could put children with us that, which I want to say have a higher probability of going permanent custody. But the reason I say that is, if it's the 4th time the children are in care, chances are that all of the kinship placements have been exhausted, and chances are they are going to go up for permanent custody. So they might put somebody that's more high risk of not reuniting to go into a family that's a potential adoptive home. So we got a call about 2 weeks ago for 1 and 2-year-old children. And I said, you know what, tell me a little bit about the case. And this was the 4th time. Now they're only 1 and 2. This is the 4th time they've been in foster care. Kinship placements have been exhausted. And I'm seeing the writing on the wall, and I'm thinking, I know they want to put these children here because we take anybody any time of the day for any reason. However, I don't want them to have to go through another move. And, I'm pushing 60 years old. I'm not going to be adopting 1 and 2-year-old children. I wanted them to put them into a younger home to begin with. So there are times I refuse children on that merit alone, that I can see the writing on the wall. Not that I have a crystal ball, but I've been in it a long time. And I want younger families to get these children from the get-go, so the children don't have to go through a change of placement. And when Ron was talking about the other two, we didn't move them over there, the agency did, but we had foster care license and they had a foster care license, but we had established this relationship with them prior. And we encouraged them, please go get your foster care license, because if this comes to be, you would get first dibs. And the reason that is because laws have changed in the United States recently, where foster parents can be considered kinship. So let's say I have 2 children in my home for 6 months, and then Aunt Sally from North Carolina calls on the last day and says, I think I'm just going to take the kids. Well, it used to be that foster parents just had to turn around and walk away. But now, if I have a 6-month relationship with that child, I am considered, quote, kin. So even though she's kin and I'm kin, we're kin, we would have the upper hand at an adoption. That doesn't happen too often, because they do family search and engagements, which is when the children come into care and they've been to care a month or 2 and they're seeing how things are going. They're already going to be looking to see if there's aunts and uncles and grandmas and other people that could take the children. If you see statistics, you'll see, well, foster care numbers have come down 4 years in a row, but that's only because they're pushing kinship so much. So it's not that there are less parentless children. In fact, there are many parentless children, but a lot of them are being put into kinship, which sometimes is good and sometimes isn't good. And then there's also the idea that we've had at least 200,000 children cross the border that are parentless in the last 3 years. So that's a whole nother realm of children out there that are getting to be a sponsor, quote, you just have to show up at the border, have your driver's license and one other form of ID, and you can order up however many children you want to take home. So that's kind of the reality of that. And so there's all of those parentless children out there too, which we need to get into good homes, not into whatever these sponsorship homes are. Maybe there's some good ones, but I think there's some bad ones too.
Can you say something about when you first are welcoming a child into your home? So a child has, just been taken from their family. It's oftentimes very traumatic experience, and they're coming into a stranger's home. And, how do you welcome that child and, show them that they're, that you love them, that you want to help them?
Well, that's a tough time, right? Because it is a pretty traumatic experience with them. Usually, most of the times, it's in the middle of the night. We just kind of welcome them into our house. We give them a hug. We kind of explain who we are and why they're here and the role that we're going to play, and we help them understand that this is a safe home for them, and they don't need to worry about being here. And we tell them that their mommy and daddy loves them, and we're going to help them. We show them to their room. This is where you're going to sleep, and we just really try to get our arms around them the best we can, and be very, very empathetic and sympathetic to their situation the best we can. But it's hard because we've had some kids just really be emotionally distraught, and it really doesn't matter what you do or say at that point. They are screaming and they are yelling and they are crying, and it's a tough situation. But the good news about these foster kids that I can share with this group, and Kathleen talked about it earlier, that those first couple of days can be tough just because of what they're going through. But these 99.5% of the foster kids that have come into our house are really, really good kids. They're just they've been dealt a tough hand, and they just need a little bit of love and a little bit of guidance and a little bit of structure and a little bit of discipline, and you'd be amazed how quick they can right the ship and turn it around.
And I'll say also that we explained to them that we know they've been told don't go with a stranger,
Yeah.
right? They've all been told that. Don't go to a stranger's house. Don't. So we say, you know what? We know your mom and dad know where you are. And the police officers and the nurses and doctors who saw you tonight, they want you to stay here. And we're what's called a helper home. And I'm a helper mommy, and he's a helper daddy. And we're going to be very kind to you, and you're going to be okay. Now, a lot of things that do help is that we try to keep siblings together. So whenever they call us for children, I say, well, how many siblings are there? Because sometimes they'll say, well, we have a 6, 8, and 10-year-old. And I'll be like, is that all the children? Well, no, there's 1-year-old twins and they're going to go somewhere else. I said, no, time out. I'm either all or none, because the children get very upset when they're not with their siblings. And we just took we just took twins in about 2 weeks ago, and they wanted to know if I would take one twin for this 10-day period. This foster family was going out of town. And I'm like, well, where's the other twin going? And they're like, well, another lady can take them, but she only wants one. And I'm like, no way. I said, I'll take them, but they have to come together. And I mean, they got here and they were only 7 months old. So they were kind of distraught. I looked different than they were. I talked different. I have a dog. Maybe they don't have a dog at the other home. And I immediately put the one baby with the next baby, and they started holding hands and stroking each other's faces. So that's a big, big thing, is if you can keep the children together, because if they're placed together in foster care, they are 70% more likely to grow up together. So be adopted together or go to kinship together or whatever the case may be. If they come into foster care and they're placed together, they're 70% more likely to grow up with that sibling. And if you ask alumni, foster children who have gone through the system and are now alumni, they will state the #1 relationship that should have been upheld is the fact that they should have been kept with their siblings. Doesn't have anything to do with their parents. Their parents don't rank in that. Their school, their teacher, their community, they want to be with their siblings. So that's a big thing. The other thing we try to do for older kids is to explain, what is a magistrate? Who was this magistrate person I saw tonight? Who was this supervisor? What's a social worker? I mean, they have no idea. And we think that we kind of know what foster care is, but there's a lot of lingo, and especially for children who can understand that, we try to explain that carefully to them so that they don't feel quite so foreign to them.
And I want to also ask about engaging with the birth families, because I can imagine, I mean, I'm wondering if you've had like hostile interactions with the birth families, or how do you put them at ease that you're on their team, that you're not competing with them? Oh yeah. Is everybody all settled? Okay, so my husband's joining me. So I'll just see it. So this is Greg. Just came back from baseball practice.
The most important question for Greg is, did the team win or lose?
Yeah, we won last inning.
That's awesome. There we go. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Nice job, Coach.
So yeah, so if you could answer just, I was talking about, how they interact with the birth families. And
well, that's been something that's developed over the years. When we started 35 years ago, that was just kind of unheard of. It was kind of a new thing. And then through the years, we've become a lot more comfortable with that. And so I will say that I think it's really a twofold positive if you can be interactive and positive with the other family, because first of all, they don't think you're trying to take their children from them. They think right from the start that you're on their side. And if the children do go home, you want to be able to have a good relationship with them so that you can see them from time to time. Now, I would say maybe we keep in touch with 40 of our kids, of all of these children that have come through our home. So not everybody wants to remember that their children were in foster care. So it doesn't happen all the time, but we really enjoy having a long-term relationship with them, whether they go to a kinship placement, or whether they go home. So I'll give you, why don't you tell me the example about Nia working with her mom?
That was a great story. So Nia was a child that we got. She was maybe 1 year old. We got her from the hospital, and Kathleen had gone to the hospital a couple of days just to visit with Nia to begin to build that relationship. But one of the things that Kathleen did was on the board in the hospital room where they write notes, Kathleen wrote a note to the mom, said, "Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm going to be taking care of Nia for you. Here's my cell phone number. We're going to take great care of her." And if you fast forward that case, I think we had Nia in our house for 14, 16, 18 months. And I would have bet you $1 that there was no chance she would ever reunify. She went home, and it ended up being, we live in Summit County, which is part of Akron. It ended up being the case of the year because of and Quay said, "I knew this was going to work the second that I saw the note on the board on the first night in the hospital." And this was a sick little girl, and Quay was a single mom. Nia was so sick when she was here, she had oxygen problems. We'd have a nurse in our home at night so we could sleep, because Nia's oxygen level would go between a certain level and the alarms would go off. And it was a pretty crazy time. But Kathleen spent a lot of time with Quay, the mom. She came to our house. Kathleen went to her house, and it was a great story.
And her mom's now in nursing school.
Yeah.
So she's going to be a registered nurse, and I'm so proud of her. And Nia's now 10, and I still text Quay from time to time and ask her how her day was. How did her test go? When she graduated from LPN school, I bought her a Littman stethoscope. I'm a registered nurse too. And she's like, "I can't believe you bought me a Littman." And I'm like, "I'm just so proud of you." So, I don't even really see Nia that often, but it's very interesting because her mom every year will say, school forms are coming home. Can you still be her emergency contact? So, I still am her emergency contact. Ron and I like to have children over. Like we do Halloween party every year because I feel like that's not a really big a holiday for other holidays you're with your family. But Halloween, it's more like a fall festival for us. And we invite any family that we're still in contact with and all of the children. And, we just do like, bobbing for apples and carving pumpkins, and then they go trick-or-treating in our neighborhood and such. So we see her about once a year, but I have a very close relationship with the mom. And you'll find that sometimes you're parenting the next generation up, not just the foster child, but also their parent. And so I don't get to have Nia as my child, but I think I'll always be part of her life. And so, that's kind of a nice way for us to be, again, because we don't adopt, but boy, we do think a lot of the people who do adopt. People say, "Oh, you're such a saint." I'm like, no, it's the adoptive parents. Those are the saints.
I will also say too, because we've seen foster parents who adopt, foster to adopt homes, when they build that relationship with the biological mother, if the case does not end well, and or the mom may just realize, "Hey, you know what? I've gotten to know Kimberly and I really like her. And I think she's going to be able to take better care of my daughter than I am. And I am going to give my daughter up for adoption so that Kimberly can take her." And it happens because of that relationship that's built. I think it's important to build a relationship with the biological families.
Yeah, we've only had a couple of incidences where maybe I felt a little bit threatened or a little bit uneasy with a biological parent. And so I had to not have community meeting places, we meet at McDonald's and swap kids there or whatever, and had to say, "Could we please take them back to the agency where, there's a police officer and everything's on video." But I think I really can only recall that happening one time. And we've worked with, I don't know, 75 families or whatever. So Mostly it's a lot less scary than what it used to be. And I think the children actually do really well if they do end up being adopted, because they still get to see maybe their parent from time to time. So back to the teacher who adopted our little girl. Last week, they just sent me a picture of the biological mom at the soccer field watching the little boy play soccer. And they had a big family picture with both of the children, the adoptive parents, the biological mom who, you know, she's developmentally delayed and she has mental illness. And I mean, she acts and looks and thinks and talks like a 12-year-old. So she really can't parent her children, but she still loves them. And I think that those children will be well adjusted as they go through the adoption process, because it's not been taboo to still have love and feeling for their biological mother, even though they know full well she cannot take care of them.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Do other people have questions?
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat. Do you see those?
Okay.
Do you want me to read them?
Yeah, read one.
So Catherine Jean Lopez asks, do you have knowledge of how to get those children coming over the border with good families? And can Catholics reach out in a real way?
You know, I don't have experience with that. I would say that it's the states that are most affected are Texas and Arizona. And you really could not be a county foster parent for those states because, well, in the case of Summit County, which is Akron area, if your county touches Summit, you can be a foster parent for Summit County. So we're actually in Medina County, but that's how so you could maybe be a foster parent from another county, but not across state lines. However, you can be you can be an adoptive parent, because you would get your own license in your own state. And then there are national boards that they post these children, and they say this child is, you know, needs a home. These 3 siblings need a home, but you have to have a foster care license to apply for them. So the good thing about the internet, I think a lot of negative things about it too, but the good thing about the internet is that now children are being able to be, I hate to say the word advertised, but they're put out there so that their names and their ages and how many siblings can cross county and state lines. So the first step is always getting your foster care license. And then the private agencies can do more between state to state adoption. County agencies, not so much, but yes, there is a way to do it.
But it is interesting. We did a talk last week, and these kids are finding their ways into our community. There was a social worker who talked about a girl, she was 14, that they just brought into care, who has been in our country for less than a year. She crossed the border, they said, a year ago, and she spoke no English. So yeah, she was in high school, but she spoke no English. And I think she came from Venezuela, they said, through Mexico into the country.
Yeah, they're into the interior as well. So again, I would just recommend going through your county. The Akron area has a very high population. It's called the North Hill area, and Filipino, Pacific Islanders, and Nepali. So we're very, very, very high population. We've had several children in our home that don't speak English, and you do a lot of sign language and do the best you can.
And then there's another question. How do you introduce the children to others so they don't feel out of place?
Yeah, you know, I think we just introduced them as they're staying with us right now. This is Laurent and Marie, and they're staying at our house right now.
But everybody knows we're foster parents.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of a moot point for us, but it's okay to say they're children who came into foster care. We're kind of getting away from the label foster children. It's like saying homeless people. You know, they're people who don't have a home, or they're children who are in foster care. But we really don't encourage them to hold on to that label forever. Our whole mission, Ron and myself, our mission is to help children heal through those traumas and abuses. I mean, we're not going to heal them, but we're going to get them on the right path. Develop their God-given talents. You know, sometimes they're just so introverted and they don't even realize the talents that we have. And so we're there that they have. So we try very hard to pull that out and encourage that in the time we have them and help them find some momentum in life. We don't want them to look at foster care as forever victimization. It should be more that this was a chapter in your life and you did things to pull yourself up and out. And whether you ended up with a family member or an adoptive placement, you're okay. You're okay. You're going to be okay. There's always going to be somebody to love you. And we try very hard to do that. We have children who have aged out of the system and they're kind of alone. Sometimes they're homeless. It's not easy. Children are not ready to be alone when they're 18. I don't think they're ready to be alone when they're 25, but thankfully there's some government programs out there that are helping to subsidize housing for 18 to 25-year-olds. But we're still in contact with quite a few kids who are older than that. And, they call Ron up for adulting 101 financial advice. And, I'll get calls in the middle of the night of my baby's got a fever. What should I do? And I'm giving them advice because they don't have moms. A lot of them, they grew up parentless. So, I'll be honest with you, once they're in your home, they're in your heart forever.
There's another question. How did you become interested in foster care, and is your church involved?
Well, Kathleen would tell you the story that when she was growing up, her mom and dad took her to Little Orphan Annie. And she just felt really bad for the kids that were in that orphanage.
The play.
I'm sorry. Well, under Mrs. Hannigan. And so she said she always wanted to, when she grew up, she was going to run an orphanage. And that opportunity did not present itself, thank goodness. But that's just kind of where I think the calling came from to do it. We have found our church to be very helpful. I think one of the things to be successful in foster care is to build a network of people to help you. Different states have different terms, but in Ohio, we have respite providers and alternative caregivers. So for example, there's a husband and wife that go to our church that would love to be foster parents, but they just can't. But they love being alternative caregivers. And so when we have a placement on Tuesdays, depending on the ages, they'll either pick the kids up from school or pick the kids up from our house in the afternoon. They have a farm. They take them out to the farm. They let them get very dirty and very muddy and very tired. They bring them in. They give them a bath. They feed them dinner. They put them in their pajamas and they bring them home. So Kathleen knows every Tuesday night, I'm going to get a break and I'm going to have an opportunity to catch my breath. Kathleen talks about sibling groups. So when you've got a baby and a 1-year-old, but then you also have 5, 6, and 7-year-olds that have to catch the bus, how you don't want to get those kids up in the morning to get the other kids to school. So we have found people at our church that literally will come to our house, pick the kids up and take them to school so that we don't have to disrupt the little kids. Now, there's lots of people out there who want to help. And I think once you create some awareness that they do that, there are some couples that will take the kids on a weekend. They'll pick them up Friday night and we'll see them again on Sunday. But I would encourage anybody. We've been able to do what we do because of the network of people that we have built that help us.
Yeah, that is really beautiful. We're trying to do that with Springs of Love, is trying to encourage parishes to start these care teams to support foster families, because it's a lot.
Well, Kathleen talked about the statistics about the 50% of the foster homes that don't last a year or they don't last past their first placement, which is heartbreaking because those of you who are in the process of getting licensed know how much time and effort that you put into that. And then to have it go up in smoke in 6 months, to me, it's just so heartbreaking. But it happens because they either get the wrong placement for their house, and or the placement they have just got so overwhelming for them. They said, well, they say to themselves, I just can't do this. And they quit and they stop. And had they had some help along the way and support and respite, they probably would have been okay and made it, but they don't know what they don't know.
And I always tell people to try to stick with what you think your first thought about what you want, what type of child you'd like to have in your home. If you want to have, children under age 5, stick with that, especially for your first time. And even if they call you with a 5-year-old, a 12-year-old, and it's your first placement, maybe just best let that say, you know what, I'm just not sure I'm up for that. And they will call you back. And there will be a 4 or 5-year-old down the line a little bit. But I think as you get into the system a little bit more comfortable with it, I think it's better to branch out at that time. But I think when new families, they get that call and you're thinking with your heart and not with your head, and you say, oh, I'm going to take that placement, I'm going to take that child, I think it'll be okay. But it really wasn't what you kind of had your heart set on. I don't mean to be like, okay, I'm only taking a 12-month-old, I mean, like a range, 0 to 5 or whatever. And then as you're more in the system, you'll get much more comfortable taking in children that are different ages. And then, people will be less likely to quit. And to be honest with you, it costs your county a lot of money. I don't know where you live, all of you, but it's anywhere between like 5,000 to 10,000 to, I've even been told 20,000 by directors that's what your county is paying for you to become a foster parent from the time they recruited you until the time they trained you and you got your license. And then you maybe did, a 6-month placement and now you're going to quit. And so it has a big impact financially on agencies and counties. So I always tell people to maybe be careful with your first placement so that you have a relatively good placement, and definitely have about 5 really strong families behind you that don't want to be foster parents, but they want to help you out, and that will help have a successful placement.
How do you recruit those families? Like, do you just say, I need help? I mean, because I think a lot of people don't want to ask for help.
Yeah,
So
well, they kind of do it to themselves, because they'll come up to you and say, oh, you're a foster home. Oh, we'd love to be a foster home, but we can't. And we say, oh, you can. And here's what you can do,
You
and
can
so
be a JV foster parent.
That's
We'll
right.
show you how.
that's right. So that they kind of open, we take advantage of those questions when they arise. And you also, through church, build relationships with families as well. And through those relationships, your relationship is strong enough to ask a friend for help.
Or the priest, I'm sorry to interrupt you. A priest will say to them, do you know of any families that are suffering with infertility, or any families that might be interested in foster care? We'd love to wrap our arms around them. We have something called layers of love in foster care, and wrapping layers of love around other adults who maybe need that and maybe provide that bridge for them, and wrapping layers of love around the children when they're in our home, because they've had so many kind of knocks along the way that you need to build them up with some padding, with some extra love. And so that's like discipline that is designed to teach and not punish. They've had these harsh disciplines, and they've had this inability to trust people and all that. And we keep our word. When we say we're going to do something or we're not going to do something, we follow through. And we're not angry. We're just matter of fact. And I think that's why the children do very well. And those are layers of love. So when they have a lot of trauma, you heal trauma with love, and you heal trauma with schedules and routines that children are familiar with. And so foster children do have these traumatic backgrounds, not all of them, but some of them have a lot of trauma in their past, a lot of stresses. And we want to do the best we can to fill those holes of stress with love, and so that they are more ready to meet the challenge as they go on. I mean, if you don't teach them when they're young or younger, or right when they come into care, how to handle stress and what are good coping mechanisms, and how we're going to treat you with kindness as we discipline you and correct you, then they're not going to learn that for when they're older. And also when they're adults, they're not going to treat their children as well, as if you can teach them some kind parenting along the way.
That's beautiful. I can't wait for your parenting book. So, and can you tell the no, what is it? The oh, you owe me a no. I love that.
Oh, yes, yes. So we kind of came up with this. I don't know if it's a technique. We call it O and O. So we would teach it to a child with something simple. If they were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, and we asked them to stop and they didn't stop, we might say, if you choose to do that again, I'm going to owe you a no down the line. So I try to teach that with something simple the first time or two we use it. And the reason we developed it was because, for example, a teenager, Candace, big, large statured girl, and she got angry and she picked up this lamp that my mother, who was passed away, gave me and was ready to hurl it across the room because she was angry. And you have to have like a quick go-to that's not going to damage them and is legal. And, would be comfortable with somebody who is bigger than me in size. And I'd say, if you choose to throw that lamp, I owe you a no, and it's going to be a big no because that lamp is important to me. So think before you do it. Now, if that's the first time that child's ever heard of that technique, they're probably going to throw it. But if they've had this a few times before with a smaller incident, then they'll know that I'm going to follow through. And that particular week, she was going to a water park with some friends on Friday. And I said, if you choose to throw that lamp, you are out for the water park on Friday. You will not go. And because I always follow through and I always keep my word on things, unless I say to them, you know what? I think that was a little bit rash. I think I was unreasonable. So I'm changing my mind, but not because you cried, but because I made a mistake and I'm going to change my mind. But that O and no technique is kind of good for teenagers and preteens, as long as they understand the concept of it ahead of time.
I'm muted. Oh, I just missed the question. Okay, I just Martha, do you see the last question? Oh, you asked it. So can you ask the question?
Hi. Oh, yeah. I don't have a copy of your book, but I was kind of scrolling through what I could read on the Amazon review. And you mentioned gardening with kids and trying to find special outings you can do with them just to make their time really special with you. And I wondered if you could talk some more about that and how you find those opportunities.
That's a lot where our alternative caregivers come in. Like we had friends were like, hey, our friend has a boat up at Lake Erie and we're going up for the day. And we had 6 teenage girls at the time and they wanted our kids for the day. We're like, yeah. I said, we've got to have life vests for all of them. But whenever people ask me, they've got a farm, can the kids come over and learn how to fish? Absolutely. So, it's not that we don't do things with the children too, but when other people kind of step forward and ask to do things with the children, as long as it's safe and they're approved and the children want to go, we take a lot of advantage of that because it's very helpful to us. But we do typical stuff like, the zoo, and we go to the amusement park once a year and, things like that. But we're kind of more on the day-to-day stuff. Like they go to counseling every week and they visit with their parents every week. And then they have doctor's appointments and they go to the psychiatrist. And so, I might have 5 or 6 appointments every week that are standing appointments for the children. So I'm doing a lot of the maintenance. And to be honest with you, I'm trying to heal the children so that when they go where they're going, they are in better shape. And I will give you an example. We got 3 children in whose father was in the Army, and the mother had committed suicide, and there was no family to take these children. So they were brought into foster care. So they were placed with us while the father was going to be discharged from the Army to come home. But what was supposed to take 3 weeks for discharge ended up taking 3 months. So during that 3-month period of time, we worked very hard to rein in these chaotic children and teach them some structure and some routine. And, what will you do when you're at home with your dad and the toothpaste is empty and the milk is empty? How will you communicate that to him? We practiced putting a list on the kitchen counter for the grocery store so that dad would know that, when he goes to the grocery store, he's going to need toothpaste and milk. And so we would actually role play and practice some of these things. And when they came in, we picked a spot for shoes and they got used to putting shoes in one place and where to hang their coat up. And I didn't know the dad, but I just assumed that he would have some sort of a regimented personality, being in the Army as a career. And he was being discharged, in this very abrupt way. So my goal was to help those children be a little bit more comfortable with that, what I imagined maybe their home would be like. I'm assuming he was not going to love the chaos that, surrounded them when they got there.
Well, thank you so much. We are at 9 o'clock, so I don't know if we should, if anybody has any other burning questions. Are there any other questions out there that, yes, do you have any parting words, Kathleen and Ron?
I would say, when we talk to groups like this or prospective foster parents, sometimes they will say to themselves, I don't know, I don't think it's a good time, I don't know. My words to you would be to just do it, because there never will be a good time. There will always be something going on, and it will be one of the best things that you ever do.
And Kimberly, if you could put my information out on the website for, if anybody wants my cell phone number or whatever, we're always willing to chat with people and encourage you and, hear what your story is in any way that we can help you.
And the other thing, Kathleen talks a lot about what is the verse in the Bible about?
Oh, Matthew.
Yeah.
Whatsoever you do to the least of my brother, that's what you did for me. So for us, Matthew 25 is that's it. That's just, we go to church, we all hear these sermons at church. And as our son says, I like that we do something about it. We don't just talk about it.
That's
Yeah,
good.
I like that scripture verse that says, so much is given, much will be expected. So,
That's right.
a lot of these kids, they haven't been given anything. And
That's
a lot of
right.
their parents haven't been given anything. So,
That's right.
And my gosh, these are not bad people. They are just from bad situations, and they just cannot get their head above water. So that's why when you treat them with respect and kindness, I think they really appreciate us most of the time. We've had very, very good experiences.
I look forward to developing doing some parenting videos with you. And yeah, I can't wait for your, like I said, for your book to come out. But you guys have your witness is just so beautiful and amazing, and it just inspires me to just want to do more. I love that your heart is just so for healing these children and their families, and just imagine the impact that you guys are having on generations to come.
I hope so. Well, we want to thank all of you guys for inviting us and having us, and for your time. And I know you're all going out and talking to other people, whether you do it or whether you just are supporting somebody else. You're all doing your part in one way or the other. So, we're really proud of all of you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, I guess I'll go ahead and give everybody your cell phone number. And
yep, you can put it on there so people have it.
Your email address and yeah, thank you for being
Thank you.
You're great.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you.
God bless you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.